A 14-year-old girl was holding a cardboard sign. It had only 3 words on it: "I want to sing with you." When Louis Armstrong saw that sign, he remembered his own childhood. 1958, Chicago. The 8,000-seat hall was packed to capacity. Everyone had come to hear Louis's trumpet. But Louis's eyes were fixed on that little girl in the front row. A black child in a worn dress, thin, trembling, but carrying an unquenchable fire in her eyes. Louis recognized that look. 40 years ago, he himself had wandered the streets with that same look, hopeless but refusing to give up. After the 3rd song, Louis did something that everyone present that night would never forget for the rest of their lives. He stopped the music, lowered the microphone, and called that little girl to the stage. When the girl sang her first note, 8,000 people held their breath. By the 2nd note, the tears had started. And when the song ended, no one was the same. Not the girl, not Louis, not a single person in that hall. So who was that girl? And what did Louis see in her? The answer reveals one of the most beautiful and emotionally powerful moments in jazz history. A moment when a legend looked into a child's eyes and saw his own past looking back at him. If this story has already touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. Because what you're about to discover is a story about fate, kindness, and the extraordinary power of giving someone a chance when they need it most. But this story doesn't begin on that concert night in Chicago. It begins 3 weeks earlier in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, where a 14-year-old girl named Elaine Carter was crying into her pillow, trying not to wake her mother. Elaine's life had not been easy. Her father had left when she was 6 years old, disappearing one morning and never coming back, leaving her mother Dorothy to raise 3 children alone on a cleaning woman's wages. Dorothy worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7, cleaning houses for wealthy white families on the north side, coming home exhausted but never complaining, never giving up, always telling her children that education and hard work would take them places she could never go herself. Elaine was the middle child, and from the earliest age she had shown a gift that set her apart from everyone around her. She could sing. Not just sing in the way most children can carry a tune, but really sing. With power, with emotion, with a depth of feeling that seemed impossible for someone so young. Elaine's voice had been noticed at church when she was only 7 years old, and by the time she was 12, she was the lead soloist in the youth choir, her voice filling the sanctuary with a sound that made grown adults weep. Everyone who heard Elaine sing said the same thing. This girl has a gift from God. This girl is going to be something special someday. But someday felt impossibly far away for a poor black girl in 1950s Chicago, where opportunities for people who looked like Elaine were limited, doors were closed, and dreams often died before they had a chance to bloom. The reason Elaine was crying that night 3 weeks before the concert was because she had just learned that her mother was sick. Dorothy had been hiding it for months, not wanting to worry her children, but the truth had finally come out. She had a serious heart condition that required expensive treatment they couldn't afford. The doctors had been clear. Without proper care, Dorothy's health would continue to decline, and the outcome would not be good. Elaine felt helpless, angry, desperate. She was 14 years old, too young to work legally, too poor to help financially, too powerless to do anything except watch her mother slowly fade while pretending everything was fine. That night, Elaine made a promise to God, to herself, to whatever power might be listening. She would find a way to help her family, would find a way to use the only gift she had, her voice, to make a difference. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. 2 weeks before the concert, Elaine heard news that made her heart race. Louis Armstrong was coming to Chicago. The greatest jazz musician in the world, the man whose voice and trumpet had been playing on the radio in Elaine's home for as long as she could remember, was going to perform at the Civic Opera House. Elaine had grown up listening to Louis Armstrong. Her mother loved his music, played his records on Sunday mornings while cooking breakfast, sang along to What a Wonderful World with a smile that made all their troubles seem smaller. To Elaine, Louis Armstrong wasn't just a musician, he was a symbol of hope, proof that a poor black child from the worst circumstances could rise to become something magnificent, could touch the entire world with their gift. Elaine made a decision that her mother would later call either the bravest or the craziest thing she'd ever done. She was going to get Louis Armstrong's attention at that concert, and she was going to ask him to let her sing. The plan was absurd, of course. Louis Armstrong was a global icon who had performed for presidents and kings. He wasn't going to stop his concert to let some random girl from the audience sing. But Elaine had learned something from watching her mother work herself to exhaustion day after day. Sometimes, the only way forward was to do the impossible thing, to try even when trying seemed pointless, to hope even when hope seemed foolish. And so Elaine started preparing. She made a cardboard sign with her own hands, writing the words carefully in her best handwriting. I want to sing with you. She practiced what she would sing if by some miracle she got the chance. She saved every penny she could find, money from returning bottles, coins she found on the street, a small amount she earned helping a neighbor with chores, until she had just enough for the cheapest ticket in the house. 1 week before the concert, Elaine told her mother what she was planning. Dorothy's reaction was complicated, part pride in her daughter's courage, part fear that Elaine was setting herself up for heartbreak, part worry about what would happen if security removed her daughter from the concert for making a scene. Baby, Louis Armstrong is a big star, Dorothy said gently. He probably won't even see your sign. And even if he does, he can't just let anyone sing with him. You understand that, right? Elaine understood. She understood the odds were against her, understood that she was probably going to fail, understood that she might end up embarrassed and heartbroken. But she also understood something else. If she didn't try, she would spend the rest of her life wondering what might have happened. And that wondering would be worse than any failure. Meanwhile, in New York, Louis Armstrong was dealing with his own struggles that no one in the public knew about. At 57 years old, Louis was tired, not just physically tired, though the constant touring and performing had taken its toll on his body, but soul tired, weary in a way that rest couldn't fix. The civil rights movement was heating up across America, and Louis found himself caught in the middle, criticized by younger black activists who thought he smiled too much for white audiences, played the entertainer instead of the revolutionary, didn't use his platform to fight hard enough for equality. The criticism hurt Louis deeply because it misunderstood who he was and what he'd been through. Louis had grown up in the worst poverty imaginable, had been sent to a reform school at 11 years old, had clawed his way up from nothing through sheer talent and determination. He had been fighting for black dignity his entire life, not with speeches and protests, but with excellence, with music so undeniable that even the most racist white person had to acknowledge his genius. Do you think artists have a responsibility to be activists, or is creating great art enough? Share your thoughts in the comments. The week before the Chicago concert, Louis received a letter that shook him deeply. It was from a woman named Margaret Wilson who had known Louis's mother, Mary Ann, back in New Orleans decades ago. Margaret wrote that she was now very old and sick, and she wanted Louis to know something before she died. Mary Ann had always been proud of her son, had followed his career through newspapers and radio, had told everyone in her neighborhood that her boy Louis was going to change the world. Mary Ann had died in 1927, when Louis was only 26, before he had achieved his greatest fame. But Margaret wanted Louis to know that his mother had seen his potential even then, had believed in him even when he was just a poor kid from Storyville trying to make it as a musician. Reading that letter, Louis wept for his mother, for the time they never had together, for all the things he wished he could have given her if she had lived longer. That letter put Louis in a reflective mood as he traveled to Chicago for the concert. He thought about his childhood, about the colored waifs' home where he had first learned to play cornet, about Miss Sarah Collins who had believed in him when no one else did, about all the people who had given him chances along the way. Louis realized that his entire career had been built on kindness, the kindness of teachers who saw potential in a troubled boy, the kindness of older musicians who mentored him, the kindness of audiences who opened their hearts to his music. And Louis wondered, when was the last time he had passed that kindness forward? When was the last time he had given someone else the chance that had been given to him? The thought stayed with him as the train carried him toward Chicago, toward a concert that would become one of the most memorable of his career. The night of the concert, October 18th, 1958, arrived with an energy that everyone present would later describe as electric. The Civic Opera House was sold out, 8,000 seats filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, united by their love for Louis Armstrong's music. Elaine Carter arrived early wearing the nicest dress she owned, a blue cotton dress her mother had made for her, simple but clean and pressed with care. She had her cardboard sign hidden under her coat, her heart pounding so hard she was sure people around her could hear it. Elaine had a seat in the front section, not the very front row, but close enough that she could see the stage clearly, close enough that maybe, just maybe, Louis would be able to see her sign. Louis took the stage at 8 o'clock, and the crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building. He was wearing his signature black tuxedo, his golden trumpet gleaming under the stage lights, his famous smile lighting up the entire hall. Louis opened with, "When the Saints Go Marching In," and the energy in the room became transcendent, people clapping, singing along, moving in their seats with joy. Elaine was clapping too, swept up in the magic of seeing her hero in person, but she was also watching, waiting, looking for the right moment to reveal her sign. She knew she might only get one chance, and she needed to time it perfectly. If you're feeling the tension of this moment, please subscribe. What happens next will stay with you forever. After 3 songs, there was a brief pause while Louis adjusted his microphone and spoke to the audience about how good it felt to be back in Chicago. This was Elaine's moment. With trembling hands, she pulled out her cardboard sign and held it up above her head, the words facing the stage. "I want to sing with you." Her arms were shaking, her heart was racing, and she was terrified that security would see the sign and make her put it down before Louis even noticed. But she kept holding it, kept her eyes fixed on Louis, silently willing him to look her way, to see her, to give her a chance. And then it happened. Louis Armstrong looked directly at Elaine Carter. His eyes found her sign first, reading the words, then dropped to her face, and something changed in his expression. Something shifted, softened, opened. Louis later told interviewers that in that moment he saw himself. He saw the 11-year-old boy at the colored waif's home, desperate for someone to believe in him. He saw the young musician trying to get noticed in New Orleans clubs, hoping someone would give him a chance to prove what he could do. He saw every hopeful child who had ever held up a sign or reached out a hand or dared to dream beyond their circumstances. And he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Louis walked to the edge of the stage and pointed directly at Elaine. "You young lady with the sign, come up here." The audience murmured in confusion. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't something Louis Armstrong did, stopping his concert to bring random audience members on stage. But Louis was already beckoning, and Elaine was already moving, her legs carrying her forward even though her brain was screaming that this couldn't be happening. Security guards looked uncertain, not sure whether to stop her or let her through, but Louis nodded at them reassuringly, and they parted to let Elaine climb the stairs to the stage. Elaine stood next to Louis Armstrong, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The stage lights were blinding, the crowd was enormous, and the man she had idolized her entire life was standing right beside her, close enough to touch. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Louis asked, his voice gentle, his famous eyes warm with kindness. "Elaine," she managed to whisper. "Elaine Carter," Louis smiled. "Well, Elaine Carter, your sign says you want to sing with me. What song do you know?" Elaine's mind went blank for a terrifying second. Then she remembered the song she had practiced, the song her mother loved, the song that meant everything to their family. "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" she said. Louis' smile widened. "That's my song," he said. "Let's see what you've got." The band started playing the opening notes, and Elaine felt the music wrap around her like a warm blanket. She had sung this song hundreds of times in her bedroom, in the shower, at church, but never like this. Never on a stage in front of 8,000 people, never with Louis Armstrong himself standing beside her. Her first note came out shaky, uncertain, barely audible over the instruments. The crowd was silent, waiting, and Elaine could feel their skepticism, their doubt, their assumption that this was going to be awkward and embarrassing. But then something happened. Elaine closed her eyes, thought about her mother, thought about all the Sunday mornings listening to Louis's records, thought about why she was really here, not for fame or glory, but for her family, for hope, for the belief that sometimes miracles happen to people who need them most. And when Elaine opened her mouth again, what came out was pure magic. Her voice filled the entire opera house, rich and powerful and full of emotion that seemed impossible from someone so young. The shakiness was gone, replaced by a confidence that surprised even Elaine herself. She sang about missing New Orleans, about longing for home, about carrying a place in your heart even when you're far away, and she sang it with a depth of feeling that made grown adults weep openly in their seats. Louis stood beside her, listening, and his face showed something rare for a man who had seen everything, genuine astonishment. This girl could really sing, not just carry a tune, not just perform competently, but really sing, with soul, with heart, with the kind of natural gift that couldn't be taught. When Elaine finished the first verse, Louis did something that transformed the moment from memorable to historic. Instead of taking back the microphone, instead of thanking her and sending her back to her seat, Louis raised his trumpet to his lips and began playing a harmony to accompany Elaine's voice. The two of them, the 60-year-old legend and the 14-year-old girl, created music together, their sounds intertwining in a way that felt destined, meant to be. Elaine sang the second verse while Louis's trumpet wove around her voice, supporting her, elevating her, treating her not as a child to be indulged, but as a genuine musical partner worthy of collaboration. The audience sat in stunned, tearful silence, witnessing something they knew they would never see again. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Not polite applause, not encouraging applause, but genuine, overwhelming applause that shook the building. 8,000 people rose to their feet, cheering and crying and trying to process what they had just witnessed. Elaine stood on that stage, tears streaming down her face, looking out at the crowd she had moved to tears with her voice. Louis put his arm around her shoulders and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, remember this name, Elaine Carter. You're going to hear it again." The crowd cheered even louder, and Elaine felt like she was dreaming, like none of this could possibly be real. But Louis wasn't finished. After the applause finally died down, Louis asked Elaine a question that the microphone didn't pick up, a private question just between the two of them. "Why did you really want to sing tonight, sweetheart? What made you hold up that sign?" And Elaine, still overwhelmed with emotion, told him the truth about her mother's illness, about their poverty, about her desperate hope that somehow her voice could make a difference. Louis listened with the same intensity he brought to music, his eyes never leaving Elaine's face. And when she finished, Louis nodded slowly as if something had been confirmed that he already suspected. What happened after the concert changed Elaine Carter's life in ways she never could have imagined. Louis Armstrong didn't just give her 3 minutes of stage time and send her on her way. He took her backstage, introduced her to his manager, and told them directly, "This girl has something special. We're going to help her." Louis arranged for Elaine to receive vocal training from one of the best coaches in Chicago, paid for entirely by Louis himself. He connected her mother, Dorothy, with a doctor friend who agreed to provide treatment at reduced cost. And he gave Dorothy an envelope containing enough money to cover 6 months of rent and medical bills, telling her simply, "Your daughter is going to be a star. Let me help. Make sure you're there to see it." Elaine Carter did become a singer, though not the kind of superstar Louis predicted. She spent the 1960s and 70s performing in jazz clubs and churches, never achieving mainstream fame, but building a devoted following among people who appreciated authentic, soulful singing. She recorded 2 albums that sold modestly but earned critical praise, and she toured the country performing in small venues where audiences could feel the intimacy of her gift. But Elaine always said that the singing was secondary to what that night in 1958 really gave her. Hope, the belief that kindness exists, that strangers can change your life, that sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be at exactly the right moment. Dorothy Carter lived for another 23 years after that concert night. The medical treatment Louis helped arrange stabilized her condition, and though she was never fully healthy, she was healthy enough to watch her daughter grow up, get married, have children of her own. Dorothy was in the audience when Elaine recorded her first album. She was there when Elaine performed at Carnegie Hall in 1971, a small show. Not a headlining performance, but Carnegie Hall nonetheless. And when Dorothy finally passed away in 1981, Elaine sang, "Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans" at her funeral, the same song that had changed everything, her voice carrying all the love and gratitude and grief that words couldn't express. Louis Armstrong and Elaine Carter stayed in touch until Louis's death in 1971. They exchanged letters regularly, and whenever Louis performed in Chicago, Elaine would be in the audience, not with a sign this time, but as an invited guest, a friend, someone Louis genuinely cared about. In one of his letters, Louis wrote something that Elaine kept framed on her wall for the rest of her life. "When I saw you holding that sign, I saw myself 50 years ago. Scared, hopeful, desperate, determined. Giving you a chance wasn't charity. It was paying back a debt I owed to everyone who gave me a chance when I was young and nobody. You reminded me why I do what I do. Thank you for that gift." Louis Armstrong died on July 6, 1971, 13 years after that night in Chicago. When Elaine heard the news, she wept for hours, not just for the loss of a mentor and friend, but for everything he represented. Louis had grown up in poverty even more extreme than Elaine's, had faced discrimination and hardship that would have broken most people, had every reason to become bitter and closed off and self-focused. But instead, he had become one of the most generous and kind-hearted people in music history, always looking for ways to help others, always remembering what it felt like to need someone to believe in you. Elaine attended Louis's funeral in New York, one of thousands of mourners who came to pay respects to the man who had changed the world with his trumpet and his smile. She didn't speak at the service, didn't try to claim special status among the celebrities and dignitaries who delivered eulogies. She just sat quietly in the back, holding the letter Louis had written her, thinking about a night 15 years earlier when a girl with a cardboard sign had caught the eye of the greatest jazz musician who ever lived. And Elaine made a promise that day, the same kind of promise she had made when she learned about her mother's illness. She would pass Louis's kindness forward, would spend her life looking for young people who needed someone to believe in them, would give others the same chance Louis had given her. Today, Elaine Carter is 80 years old. She still lives in Chicago in a modest apartment not far from the South Side neighborhood where she grew up. She hasn't performed publicly in decades, but she teaches vocal lessons to children from low-income families charging whatever they can afford, which is often nothing at all. Some of her students have gone on to successful music careers. Others just learned to love singing, to express themselves through music, to feel the joy of creating something beautiful. And every single one of them has heard the story of the night in 1958 when a 14-year-old girl held up a cardboard sign and Louis Armstrong gave her the chance of a lifetime. The cardboard sign still exists. Elaine kept it all these years, stored carefully in a protective frame. The words faded but still legible. "I want to sing with you." Next to the sign is the letter from Louis, the one that explained why he had done what he did. And next to the letter is a photograph taken that night, Elaine and Louis on stage together, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling with a joy that transcends the black and white image. That photograph has been published in several books about Louis Armstrong's legacy, usually with a caption that reads, "Louis Armstrong and young fan Elaine Carter, Chicago, 1958. But the caption doesn't tell the real story. The real story is about kindness rippling forward through time, about one moment of generosity creating waves that are still spreading 66 years later. Louis Armstrong once said, "What we play is life." He meant that music isn't separate from the human experience. It is the human experience, compressed into sound and rhythm and melody. But Louis lived that philosophy beyond music. He played life the same way he played trumpet, with generosity, with heart, with a constant awareness that the notes you create don't just disappear into the air. They land somewhere, touch someone, change something. When Louis saw Elaine Carter holding that sign in 1958, he didn't see a disruption to his concert or an imposition on his time. He saw a human being who needed something he could give, and he gave it without hesitation, without expecting anything in return, without knowing whether it would matter or be forgotten by the next morning. That's the legacy of Louis Armstrong, not just the music, though the music is immortal. It's the kindness, the generosity, the understanding that true greatness isn't about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you make possible for others. Elaine Carter would have been just another talented girl from a poor neighborhood, her gift wasted because no one gave her a chance. Instead, she became a singer, a teacher, a keeper of Louis's flame, passing forward what was passed to her. And somewhere today, right now, one of Elaine's students is probably singing, their voice filling a room with beauty, not knowing that the chain of kindness connecting them to that moment goes all the way back to a night in Chicago when a man with a trumpet saw himself in a girl with a sign. Louis Armstrong gave Elaine Carter a microphone in 1958. He didn't give her fame or fortune or an easy path through life. He gave her something more valuable, belief. The belief that her voice mattered, that her dreams were worth pursuing, that someone in the world saw her potential and thought she deserved a chance. That belief carried Elaine through difficult years, through setbacks and disappointments, through moments when she wanted to give up. And that belief is still alive today, in Elaine's students, in their students, in everyone who has ever been touched by the kindness that Louis Armstrong modeled and Elaine Carter perpetuated. Some people leave behind monuments when they die. Louis Armstrong left behind music, and he left behind people. People whose lives were changed by a moment of kindness, a word of encouragement, a chance given when chances were scarce. Elaine Carter is one of those people. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of others. Young musicians Louis mentored, fans he treated with dignity, strangers he helped without publicity or recognition. They're all part of Louis's legacy, all notes in a song that keeps playing long after the original musician has gone silent. And that's what we should remember about that night in Chicago in 1958. Not just that Louis Armstrong made a 14-year-old girl's dream come true, though he did. Not just that Elaine Carter sang beautifully and moved 8,000 people to tears, though she did. What we should remember is that kindness is never wasted, that giving someone a chance can change not just one life, but many lives, that the music we make with our actions continues playing long after we've left the stage. Louis Armstrong knew that. He lived that. And through people like Elaine Carter, he's still teaching it, 66 years later and counting. So the next time you see someone holding up a sign, reaching out a hand, asking for a chance they probably won't get, remember Louis Armstrong. Remember that he was once a boy with nothing and someone gave him a chance. Remember that he spent his life passing that chance forward to others. And maybe, if the moment is right and the person is genuine and the universe is paying attention, you can be someone's Louis Armstrong. You can give someone a microphone and watch them discover what they're capable of. You can be the kindness that changes everything. That's the real lesson of that night in Chicago. That's the real legacy of Louis Armstrong, and that's a song worth singing forever.